You're very welcome to another episode of the Scaling Your Business podcast. For this episode, we are joined by Jack Murray, the CEO of MediaHQ. Jack, you're very welcome to the show.
Hi, Rian. How are you?
I'm very good. Jack, chatting off air, typical fashion with this podcast, focus on 3 areas: early influences, challenges, pivotal moments. No different with you. Back to the beginning. You grew up in Ballinasloe, Galway. Any standout favorite memories from growing up out west?
Yeah, I grew up in a shop. Family business is a shop, farm supplies business that was started back by my great grandfather, would you believe, in the 1880s, and it was always very busy. We were always surrounded by business. The shop was next door to the house. It was a very colourful place. There was always something happening. My kind of social network when in the 1980s when I grew up was you'd come home from school, you'd wolf down your dinner and you'd run next door to the shop to see what happened during the day. And I suppose that's how I got all my early grounding in business. It was tough. The business in the 1980s was tough, and there was tough things happened. Remember once, the business was burgled in the 1980s and things like that. But it was all we knew, and it was definitely it definitely whet my appetite for getting involved in business. And when I look at where my career has gone since then, it was also very fun growing up in a small town. When you grow up in a small town, you think it's the center of the universe. And I'm kind of fascinated by the ecosystem of a town, and I always have been since. And it saddens me really to see the decline of the Irish town. And a town like Ballinasloe in the 1980s, when I grew up, and as it is today, are two completely different things. And I remember being a very vibrant place. I remember at the weekends and Saturday, a busy market town where they'd fill up with people from the countryside coming in and going up to meet your friends, and that real buzz at the center of town. And that's gone now, but it was very happy. It was a very happy place growing up for those reasons.
Touched on your grandparents owning a shop or been in the family that long. Who do you think inspired you or influenced you the most while you were growing up?
Well, it's the obvious answer is your parents, but like I think your childhood comes in your progression comes in different ways. It was never any doubt to me that I wanted to work in business, and it actually goes back further than my grandparents, my great grandparents. So my great grandfather John Murray was one of a very large family, and in 1886. It was a very difficult time in Irish history because there was a lot of people being evicted from the land, and they were from a very small, poor farm just outside Ballinasloe. Ballinasloe is on the border between Galway and Roscommon, so it was in South Roscommon. And he had a decision to make at 29 years of age, and he decided that he was going to leave and try and save the family farm, and he hit for America. And he arrived in New York on Palm Sunday, 1886, and we don't really know what happened to him, but something amazing happened because he got an idea for a business, and he came back a number of years later and went to the main street in Ballinasloe and bought a premises that's now a public house, and started the family business. And that's the business that my brother and my mother run today. And I suppose that was the biggest kind of spark for me in getting into business. When you're surrounded by it, and when you look around, and when generations upon generations of people in your family have paddled their own canoe, have sorted their own problems out, have been self-driven, and know the power of hard work. Like my mother and father would work you under the table, and that's all I saw. And I suppose the other thing that I saw a lot of growing up was, if the phone rang in our house and it was a customer, like from knee high, you knew to be very polite, to do what they wanted, to help them out in any way you could. And that was ingrained in me from a very early age, and had a big influence on me.
I release a new podcast 45 minutes in length every single day, and have been doing it since the start of this year. And one thing that comes up as a common trend is the effect people have on us throughout our early years. I bring this up because there's a story you tell about a guy called Michael O'Grady and the summer of 1984. I've also never felt quite as a sporty kid growing up, and I was definitely always picked last as well. Do you mind sharing that story and the effect?
No, I don't. Well done on your research. Michael O'Grady was a primary school teacher, retired primary school teacher from outside Ballinasloe, and my dad played rugby, and I always wanted to be love sport, absolutely love sport to this day. Love cycling, love every sport, love hurling, but I was never much good at anything as a kid, and would have been one of those kids that was picked last. And in 1984, Ballinasloe had a very good reputation in underage rugby, and Michael O'Grady was the rugby coach, and they had a very good community games program that runs still to this day. And a lot of people from Ballinasloe, Michael O'Grady, Carmel Greeley, would have worked in the national community games. And it came to try out for the under 11 rugby team, and I kind of expressed a preference to do that. And I would have been the kid in Gaelic football and hurling, soccer. I would always have been left. And it's a terrible feeling. It's a terrible feeling when the group divides and two captains are picked, and you know your name isn't going to be called kind of anytime soon. And went to the first few training sessions, and they had to pick a squad for the community games, and got a sense that things were going well. And Michael O'Grady was always very good to encourage us and, you know, to get us involved. And on one fateful night, I'm 47 years of age now, so it was 37 years ago. It was the final trial, and we had to go up to the pitches in Garbly to play a match, and they were going to pick the team. And everything went well that night. Everything went great. I scored 2 tries. I got picked on the team, and we went on this unbelievable journey where the team the year before us had got knocked out in County Galway by a team from Clare Galway. So they were our kind of nemesis team. We bet them, we won the county final, we won the Connacht final, we won the prize of going to the national finals, which were held up in Meath in Mosney then. And we all hit off on this mad adventure. We won the All-Ireland semi-final really easily. I remember we beat your team from Donegal by I think 9 tries to 1. And we met a team from Knockline in the final, and it was a draw at the end of normal time, and it went to 3 periods of extra time, would you believe? And the ball broke loose. One of the guys from Knockline caught it, ran the length of the field, scored the try, and we had lost the All-Ireland final. Everyone was devastated, and I was there, Rian, and I was delighted. And I kind of said to the lads, look, I remember them all telling me to shut up. I said, look, guys, we had a great year. Look at the friendships we made. Look at all that we did. And like, it was such a formative experience for me in, I suppose, leadership, in being chosen, in being trusted. And the year after our team, they went and they won the thing. And still to this day, the guys that were on the team the year after, I met them a couple of years ago at a wedding. We were having a couple of drinks before the music kicked in, and they were still slagging us, going, 85, we did it in 85, you didn't do it in 84. And we were having a laugh about it. But yeah, it was a very formative experience. And I suppose it gave me confidence then that, you know, I could do things. And I went on to play rugby until I was 20. I went to a rugby school, and that was the sport in which I got picked. And there was some really good role models in our school. Kieran Fitzgerald captained an Irish Triple Crown team in 1985. He was a former student of our school, and other people came along as well. And it was a very good pathway for, I suppose, developing as a person, developing within a team structure. And still to this day, my kids play camogie, my 2 daughters, and you know, I never let them out of a team training session. And they say, why, Dad? Why are you so insistent on this? And I'd say, because it's not about you, it's about everybody else. And I said, when you don't show up, I said, everybody else is affected, and that's the team dynamic. And I suppose that's what I learned through that.
I also know that you've just touched on you're a father to 2 daughters, a dog owner, been to places like New York I'll forgive you for this, but you're a Galway GA fan. I'm a Kilkenny
I
fan,
am.
hence why I'll forgive you. Um, what's what's one thing you're into or curious about that not a lot of people would know about you?
What that I'm into that not a lot know about me. I once cycled the stage of the Tour de France. I like things that are hard. I love cycling long distances. I go out to Wicklow and I seek the hardest, steepest hills, and I try and cycle up and down them. And I really love doing that. Yeah, I like pushing myself physically. I love cold water. I love getting into the sea, get in December. And I always joke with people when you get to cold water that they say it's really cold here, and I say, yeah, that's why we're here. So you go to the mountains, you go to the mountains on the bike for the pain, and you go to the water for the cold, and you go for you go for what's there in abundance. So if you're not into the pain, climbing a mountain, don't do it. If you're not into the cold, don't get into the sea. And it's a brilliant transaction if that's what you're there for.
Agreed. I'm a fan of both of them too. You're into storytelling.
Mm.
What is it about storytelling? I know that you've had some shows where you talk about the likes of the plane landing on the Hudson River to, I'm sure you leverage storytelling in your own business and previous businesses to connect with people. What is it about it?
Um, well, I suppose all my professional career has been about storytelling. So from when I left college, I studied marketing. Um, the story spark that was lit in me when I look back at my life and kind of, you know, see where it came from. It came from my father, and it came from that story I told at the start about my great grandfather going on this journey to save the family to New York. And I suppose that lit a spark in me, and it kind of really fascinated me. And it was, you know, there's a portrait of him in our living room taken in the 1880s. And the notion that, you know, a story about someone's endeavor 150 years ago could really, you know, still be fresh and true and powerful today. Um, I studied marketing in college. I worked in product marketing. And then I suppose I came to a junction in my career very early on. I had a great job in the marketing department in DeBarry Shoes, which is based in Ballinasloe. And I wanted to do something that had a creative spark in it. I didn't fully know then that I wanted a career that was full of stories. But on a fateful day, I had an interview to be a news reporter on a local radio station called Shannonside, and I had an interview place for a postgraduate course in what was the DIT then in journalism. I didn't get the job, but I got a place on the journalism course. And Rian, I remember the first day going in, sitting in the room, looking round and realizing, having this great sense, this is the right place for me. I have arrived where I need to be. It was a wonderful year, and some of my colleagues from the class are still involved in journalism. Patrick Frayne, the Irish Times, was a classmate of mine, and I suppose from that was a spark that kind of gave me a boost. I did a couple of writing jobs. My original aim was to be a radio journalist, and then pretty quickly I got a call one day from the university, and it was the course director, and it was probably the biggest break. It is the biggest break I ever got in my career. And he said, "I've just got a call from the Progressive Democrats. They're looking for a new press officer, and they wanted me to recommend someone." And he said, "I know you love politics. I'm going to recommend you. How do you feel about that?" And I said, "Great." And like the following day, I was in government buildings doing an interview. And 3 or 4 days later, I had an interview with Mary Harney, and I got the job. And I suppose from that day to this, my life and my career have been full of stories. And when you work in the media, you realize very quickly, you know, on days that you really struggle, you think, if only I had a better story today, everything would be better. And the currency that journalists work on is how good is the story you're working on, how good is the story you're telling. And then I've taken that through my career, through working in corporate communications, through setting up MediaHQ, to setting up All Good Tales, the storytelling agency, through some of the podcasts I've done as well. And there is no better way to communicate than with the story. And it is the only thing that matters when it comes to resonating with an audience. And it's a riddle. Every situation is different. There's a set of tools and techniques that you can learn, but every application of them is different. And I suppose that's what fascinates me about storytelling.
From 1997, journalism and DIT, to today, you've been heavily involved in media, in some way, shape, or form. You've once said about Twitter, referencing Twitter, that the gatekeepers have now been done away. What did you mean by that?
I think the power of the media has passed from the corporation to the individual. So everybody now has a computer in their pockets, more powerful than the computer that sent the first person to the moon, and everyone is a publisher. So everybody has the power and the ability to tell a story. It used to be the case that you needed a huge radio mast, or you needed a big printing press. You don't need that anymore. You need 1,000 committed people to a cause, and you can change the world. And I'll give you an example. The last cycle I did was a few days ago. Where I'm sitting here today is I'm about a mile from Mizzen Head, and my good friend Kieran Cannon, who is an ultra cyclist and a Fine Gael TD, he decided that he was going to cycle the length of Ireland. I was going to attempt to cycle the length of Ireland in under 24 hours.
Wow.
And it was a mad idea. And I kind of said, can I come for the first stage? So I went with them on Saturday, and I cycled 100 kilometers away, and I cycled back. So I did 200 kilometers, but these guys did 600 kilometers. And that story, or that drive to do that for a children's charity called Hand in Hand, has raised tens of thousands of euros for that charity. And it was the story, it was the endeavor, it was, I got back here at 7 o'clock on Saturday night, and they had a live tracker, and I kept checking it. And I woke at 6 o'clock on Sunday morning saying, where are they? Are they nearly there? And it was just the excitement around, could they get there? And they got there with half an hour, 35 minutes to spare. They did it in 23 hours and 25 minutes. And I think the power is now there for people to tell great stories. And look, we all know about the tools, and whether it's TikTok or Twitter or Instagram or your own platform or podcast, there's never been a better time for niche topics, niche audiences, for people to find their tribe and grow their tribe and connect with them. And I suppose it's the golden age. It's a golden age for telling stories as a result.
I spoke to Paul Farrell from Virgin Media 3-4 weeks ago. One of the things that came up in conversation was around media companies building trust. That's one of the focuses. How do you think that either traditional or online media companies can build trust with their clientele or customers?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the funny thing about like that, and you learn it very early. You learn it before you go into study journalism or media school. The first one is tell the truth. Tell the truth. When you study journalism, you're always told that the currency in which you deal with is the truth. And when you're public relations, the currency in which you deal with is information, but underpinning that is the truth. And the minute you veer away from that, it's a very, very dangerous place. So I suppose that's the first thing, tell the truth. I'm reading a brilliant book at the minute. I was reading it last night about one of these new social media agencies called Bellingcat. The book is called This is Bellingcat, where it's a social media news agency. And what they do is they go out and they authenticate information on crises, on wars, on conflicts. But trust is about believing in things. It's about the truth. It's about how people treat each other. It's about respect. I just came off an email exchange with someone that I want to do business in, and I met them on Zoom last week, and they said, "Do you want a non-disclosure agreement?" And I said, "No, I don't. I said, I appreciate you met me last week, and I said, we're exploring this opportunity, and I trust you. And I said, there's no point in having an NDA. And I learned that from my mother and father, and that you take people as you see them, and trust is a two-way street. So I think you have to be open and you have to be giving. So I think you have to be able to receive people, and I think you have to, and for all the negativity online and social media, there's a lot of positivity as well. And I think it's about trust, it's about respect, and it's about building relationships. And I think all of the media can learn that. You started this podcast a while back, and you gather listeners show by show, interaction by interaction, good guest by good guest, story by story. And that's how you roll the rock up the hill. There's no magic in it. There's no magic button in it. But it's about doing the right things and doing them over and over again, and having that kind of at the base of what you do.
What do you think going into the next decade, or at the beginning of the next decade, what do you think is potentially the biggest hurdle that online media will have to overcome?
I think there'll continue to be fragmentation. I think some of the big publishers and broadcasters, I think the big guys will get bigger. I think there's a group in the middle who have legacy cost and legacy issues, who, if they can't sort out those legacy issues of high cost, will run into trouble. I still think, if you look at the modern newspaper, there's probably 14 or 15 types of income that newspapers need to be tapping into now. We had a guest speaker at MediaHQ. We do a culture talk once a month about what making the news means. And we had a speaker a couple of weeks ago, and like the most profitable thing the New York Times run now is their gap year program. So they run this gap year program where their journalists lecture, and they give this unbelievable experience in New York, and it costs somewhere between $20 and $25,000 to do it. So that's an innovative product. It's not journalism. And between podcasts, newsletters, I think if you're adaptable, look, I started MediaHQ, and it was a printed media directory. It was a spiral bound book, and we're now a software as a service product that uses AI, big data, and we analyze information. And we've gone on a journey so when I hear traditional media people, playing a violin and crying about the way things are, I say, look, put away the violin and just, start embracing the world the way it is, and stop wishing it was the way you wanted it to be, because there's nothing you can do about that. And I also think for media companies, it's a journey, and it's a journey about tuning into your audience. And it doesn't matter if you're selling widgets or you're running a local newspaper. There's a way to connect with your audience, and the tools have changed. They've got cheaper, they've got more agile, they've got more mobile, but you have to be willing to go on the journey. Like, one of my mantras in MediaHQ is, if change is what you do, not what happens to you, you'll be okay. And I think there's a lot to learn in that for a lot of media companies.
You've touched on it a few times, but you haven't necessarily said exactly what it is. What is MediaHQ? I'll leave links to it below, by the way.
Yeah, so MediaHQ is a software as a service platform, and we help PR and communications people find journalists, build media lists, and distribute press releases. So if you listen to a news bulletin in Ireland, UK, a large proportion of the press releases that will have gone from PR comms teams to journalists will have originated in MediaHQ. So I'll give you an example. Dublin Airport, DAA are really good clients of ours. If they're issuing a press release today, they log into MediaHQ, they have a whole list of saved media lists. They distribute their press release through the platform. It'll come from their email address. All of the analytics around the send, all of the research, and all the technology, we do all of that. And companies pay us a fee for 12 months for access to the platform, and they manage all of their outbound through the software.
Well, that's a pretty cool tool for those who are interested in it. As I said, I'll leave links to it below. Coming towards the end of the interview, if you were to write a book, what would the title be?
Well, I have written a book, and the book is coming out in October. And the title of the book is, it's called The Magic Slice, How to Master the Art of Storytelling for Business. And The magic slice, Rian, is something I discovered in my work with MediaHQ. So as you can imagine, MediaHQ is like this kind of industrial factory where I have a screen in my office where I can see the news being shared just before the journalists look into it. And a number of years ago, just when the 100,000th story was being shared on the platform, I had a bit of an epiphany, and it was about the true nature of storytelling and why it's so powerful. And the magic slice basically is two circles. One is what you want to talk about, and the other is what people are interested in. And the magic slice is where the two circles intersect. And in the book, I talk about what is storytelling, what's the science behind it, how to structure a story. I'll go through the 6-step magic slice process for brands and companies, and like how do you find your magic slice and how do you tune into it. And then at the end of the book, I give examples and case studies of how to use storytelling in your everyday work, from presenting to running brand newsrooms to how do you engender a story culture in your organization. And it's something I've wanted to do for a while. It's been knocking around, and when the pandemic hit, I had two objectives. I said I was going to get fit and I was going to write the book, and thankfully I've managed to do both.
I will certainly purchase it. I've been fascinated with storytelling ever since my father wrote a book on storytelling, probably about a decade ago. So you can count me in to purchase a copy of it. I don't know if there's a where people can like pre-buy it or like pre-purchase it. If there is, I'll leave a link to that below as well.
Yeah, it's currently, I'm actually waiting to talk to the designer today or tomorrow about the cover design, and my projected date for it to hit purchase is about October.
Okay, awesome. Well, I wish you nothing but the best with that book. Two more final questions for you, and be honest in this one. What do you think the chances are of Galway winning the All Ireland this year in hurling?
I think they're actually quite good. I wasn't very hopeful last year, but I'm I think they'll be there at the end. I'm always very realistic about the teams that I follow, and I think we've a good chance this year. I think it's between ourselves, Limerick, and Tipperary, from what I can see now, and I get a sneaking feeling about us this year. I feel good about it.
It will be an interesting one if Kilkenny and Galway meet in the Leinster final, because it won't just be for the Leinster final; it will be for the league title as well, which is a strange one.
That magic competition that didn't have a final. I'm still trying to figure that out.
Anywho, final question is: I'd like you to imagine it's the year 2030, and you're looking back on the last decade. So we're now talking as if it's the year 2030. You can answer this personally or professionally, but what would you like to be looking back on?
I'd like to be looking back on my two daughters as confident, healthy, happy young women, advanced in their life and happy and content, to be still, happily married and delighted with my life and all of that. To be CEO of a dynamic information company called MediaHQ, and that has grown internationally, and to have written a few more books, to have written at least 2 more books, I would say. And if I could achieve that, it'd be brilliant.
Jack, it's been a pleasure. I wish you nothing but the best going forward. But for now, thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you, Rian.